simpler way. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and check test 1, 2, 3, 4. Good afternoon, and welcome to the International NDI Center, where today we'll be having microphone testing. Check test 1, 2, 3, 4. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and welcome to the NDI Center. Today will be, I can. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Check test 1, 2, 3, 4. Microphone test. Check 1, 2, 3. That's you guys. That ain't nothing's coming through me. Oh, oh, got it. Yeah, okay. No, I'm with you. Check test 1, 2, 3, 4. As long as you're good with the levels, I can most certainly talk for the rest of the afternoon if need be, because I'm a trained audio technician, and one of my fantastic capabilities is giving microphone checks. You'll notice that the tone and timbre of my voice remains relatively the same, which is pretty much the spectrum of reproductive audio sound systems. I rarely pop my P's, but occasionally, if needed, I will or pop, pop, pop to see if anything's going to do that. No, not at all. I'm quite used to it as an audio A1 technician. I hear this all the time, sometimes in many different languages. So I realize it's probably going out over fiber or copper and possibly even up to a bird in the sky and then back down to us. So there might be a slight delay in that signal. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, and welcome. Continue. You're good? Fabulous. I think that's doable. Good morning, good evening, good day, and welcome to Washington, D.C., where today we'll be doing a microphone check, test 1, 2.
key on, you push the little thing and pop it down, okay? You see that little IR receiver right there? All you do is go up here and click sync, and click sync. Right. So we'd have to like get it off the gun with that person and then do that. Tackle them, grab their leg, drag them out of the room. Them too. Hold them up. Yeah, that's right. Tough luck. All right, good. That's how you have to treat some of these VIPs. Thing on, I mean, you'll know if it's right because it comes up.
So we'll be starting in about 1 minute. Great. Well, I think we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name's Scott Hubley. I'm the Director of Governance Programs at NDI. And it's an honor for NDI to be able to host today's panel. I'll start with a few words about kind of why we're all here and the topic that we're discussing. And then hopefully we'll have, after some introductory remarks, an opportunity for some good informal exchange. I'd like to kind of extend NDI's thanks to our partners in this event. We've organized this event at the margins of a program of the House Democracy Partnership, which is a peer-to-peer partnership between the U.S. Congress and 14 partner legislatures around the world, 3 of whom are represented in today's discussion. The program is supported by USAID, and we're thankful for their support. And it's also happening at a very interesting time. Many of you may know that September 15th was the International Day of Democracy. What you may or may not have known is that it was also the beginning of the Global Legislative Openness Week, which I'll talk a little bit about in my introductory remarks. I think, you know, NDI has the good fortune and the privilege of working with parliaments in a number of countries around the world. And I think we're seeing some common challenges with respect to parliaments that may be in very, very diverse environments, but are still facing some common challenges. I think citizens globally are in a very demanding mood. Social media and technology, mobile is changing citizens' expectations in some ways. In many countries, citizens are now able to provide comments on things at the click of a button on a phone, but yet they engage in the political process really at elections primarily. And you often hear, I'm sure many MPs on the panel will be able to share this experience, but citizens want to see their MPs not just only at elections or at the campaign period, but also in between the elections. And so at the same time, citizens are more demanding. There are more and more burdens placed on MPs. It's not a job that I think anyone who knows the job relishes. They're oftentimes working very early in the morning to very late at night, constantly, with limited opportunity for downtime, and the pressures of the position still continue to grow. In many developing legislatures or transitional legislatures, kind of the staff structure is also still in the process of developing, so the resources for MPs in fulfilling their duties are also challenging. So at the same time, you have society changing very rapidly. You have legislatures, which are very tradition-bound institutions. And so as part of Global Legislative Openness Week, we've started just a discussion globally on how we can help parliaments deal with these challenges. In many countries, in the House of Commons, for example, the opposition and government benches are two sword lengths apart because the traditions of the institution date back to the Middle Ages. There are still parliaments in the world where people wear wigs. And so there's this, at the same time you have society changing very rapidly, you have parliaments that are very tradition-bound and are now just beginning to experiment with how to use Facebook and social media and new technologies for communicating. So during Global Legislative Openness Week, people have been exchanging ideas from around the world, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about a few things during today's panel. So let me introduce our guests. There are full bios that are available on the table outside the room, so you can pick up the bios as you leave if you don't have them. But we'll start off today's panel with Abhinav Bal, who manages the OGP's peer exchange program. Before this, he had served as director at Global Integrity and had also worked for the Commonwealth Secretariat in their Governance and Institutional Development Division, working with the 54 Commonwealth states. And so currently at OGP, he's supporting a similarly diverse group of 64 countries that are part of OGP. And he'll say a few words about kind of where OGP is in terms of legislative openness. We'll then turn to John Wunderlich at the Sunlight Foundation. As many of you may know, the Sunlight Foundation is a leading civil society organization in the US, certainly working on these issues of legislative openness and government transparency. And as part of GLOW, has worked with civil society organizations in 100 countries around the world on some advocacy with respect to constructive engagement with legislatures on openness. We'll then turn to our three members of parliament. And I think we can pretty much just go in order on the table. We'll start with Honorable Abdul Qadir Zazai, who's the chair of the International Relations Committee in the Walesi Jirga in Afghanistan. He had previously served as a director in the Ministry of Business and Industry, and is perhaps of relevance for today's discussion, as was the founder of the Afghan Youth Society and is the director of an Afghan youth organization. And I think talking about social media and new technology, of course, there is it's the youth that are really driving some of these changes. After that, we'll turn to Honorable Shazia Mari. She is a member of the National Assembly of Pakistan, serving on the Standing Committee on Commerce and the Parliamentary Committee on Electoral Reform, as well, and will share some of her own observations in using Facebook and social media and some of her experiences. And lastly, we're also honored to have with us Senator Kero from Kenya. Senator Kero is the current chair of the Senate Committee on Finance, Commerce, and Budget. The week's program that the House Democracy Partnership put together this week dealt with the budget process, and transparency of the budget is also, I think, very relevant to today's discussion. So with that, I'll hand the floor over to our first panelist. I'll ask each of them to speak for 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So Abhinav, would you like to start us off?
Great. Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me here, and it's a pleasure to be here and share the stage with countries that are members of OGP, countries that are eligible for OGP, and countries that we'd love to have and work on eligibility with OGP. I think my remarks would probably, for the purpose of this panel, would be centered around the Open Government Partnership. And for the uninitiated, perhaps I'll summarize what OGP is about. It's an exciting new international initiative that seems to be generating some buzz, and we'll kind of walk you through what makes this unique and different from other international initiatives, and then talk about the opportunities that it creates for parliamentary openness, and ways in which parliaments can be further integrated into and strengthen what we have going right now with the Open Government Partnership. So the OGP is a new international multilateral initiative that brings together governments and civil society, and that strives to create concrete commitments on open government. And with open government, we essentially mean trying to make governments more transparent, more accountable to their citizens, and also enlarge the sphere of public participation in government processes. The initiative was launched in 2011, so it's 3 years old. It's still very new, so it's a work in progress, so to speak. And next week we celebrate our 3-year anniversary within a high-level event in New York at the sidelines of the UN General Assembly meetings. So it started off as 8 countries getting together and trying to put together a international initiative that would be different from existing international initiatives, and since then it's grown to about 64 countries. So what makes things unique, what makes OGP unique, is this emphasis on government and civil society dialogue. So it was conceived as a partnership between government and civil society, and the different structures as well as the processes of OGP reflect this partnership. So an example is that it's governed by a steering committee of equal numbers of government and civil society. And one of the key requirements is that the governments must have a regular dialogue with civil society through the participation with an OGP. Another thing that's unique about this is that it's an international platform, but it can be used to enact meaningful domestic reforms. So countries join the international platform of OGP, and when they do that, one of the key requirements of OGP is to create national level action plans. And these national level action plans contain very specific commitments that countries are pledging to. And each of these commitments articulate practical ways in which governments are opening themselves up. So this could be a wide range of issues, from extractive transparency to greater budgetary openness to open data to greater public participation in legislative processes or in the process of providing feedback to government for accountability mechanisms. So this characteristic of it being an international platform where countries can come in an international initiative, but essentially it's about domestic reforms that occur at the national level. Another key feature is the IRM, which is the independent reporting mechanisms to ensure that governments are delivering on their commitments. Each country is evaluated independently. And lastly, what makes OGP unique is that it brings together these rich networks of government reformers and civil society reformers and brings them together and enables this exchange, both in terms of ideas, inspiration, and expertise, but also it provides a way to build trust between government and civil society. So it's opening up new spaces through which government and civil society can interact. So with that overview in mind, perhaps I can talk very briefly about the opportunity that it brings in terms of legislative openness. Now, primarily, OGP is an executive-led effort in the sense that the government signs on to the OGP and the government creates a national level action plan containing commitments, but by no means is it our intention to restrict it to simply the executive branch. In fact, the issue of openness is not restricted to one particular branch of government, and indeed citizens are demanding greater openness across the parliament as well as across the judiciary. So OGP can really be strengthened by this sort of high-level political involvement of parliamentarians and can be strengthened by this ongoing political debate about openness that's occurring across national capitals across the world and indeed in countries as well. So what would be interesting is if parliaments can take a greater role in participating in OGP and making commitments towards greater openness. And thanks to the efforts of NDI, who chair the Legislative Openness Working Group, we've seen that countries have signed on to the OGP in their first action plans were predominantly executive-based, but now we see this movement towards greater openness in parliaments. So an example is Chile. The Congress of Chile has created an exclusive parliamentary openness action plan for the parliament itself, where they commit to very practical things that they can do to open up parliamentary processes. Another way that parliaments can strengthen OGP is by providing the oversight of executive-led efforts on openness. So when the government signs on to OGP and they're creating these commitments, I think the accountability function of the government to deliver on these commitments can be strengthened by parliamentary oversight, and so we encourage parliamentary participation in that respect as well. And lastly, it's also the mechanisms that it's providing the space or the avenue for increased trust between civil society that's working on openness issues and parliamentarians, and so to build that ongoing dialogue and trust between the two groups. Very often we see civil society and government tends to work in they tend to have an antagonistic relationship, and what we're trying to do with OGP is change that, where we challenge both civil society and government to work constructively and cooperatively together. So perhaps I'll stop there with my comments, and I'll be happy to, of course, answer any questions that may occur.
Great. I think those are great observations about potential points of legislative openness engagement, and I think there is discussion about perhaps also finding ways to engage legislatures in the governance mechanism. I think you see time and time again governments engaging with civil society and then kind of elected representatives perhaps being engaged only at a later point. And so I think it is an opportunity to kind of broaden the dialogue even further. So thanks, Abhinav. With that, we'll turn to John Wunderlich to hear a little bit more about the civil society half of this equation, and your thoughts on this, ways of maybe finding more constructive engagement where there's space for that, where a more adversarial approach is also appropriate, and just maybe kind of some starting points from where civil society organizations are on this issue around the world.
Sure, thank you. So the Sunlight Foundation has been involved in legislative reform work since about 2006 when we were first founded. And one reason I love the makeup of this panel is that we're approaching the issue from a variety of different angles. And one thing we've discovered in engaging in legislative reform work is that the typical actors that would be responsible for helping a legislature to update or modernize or reform how it functions, that would be MPs or legislative committees or journalists, have a hard time speaking on behalf of the entire legislative institution. All of those people, all of those different perspectives reflect the interest of a journalist with a big story, or the party, or this current Congress, or a specific legislative agenda. So well, one thing we've discovered is that the strongest legislative reform initiatives tend to be grounded in the community that exists within and outside the legislature. And that's something that Sunlight learned early on in our work with the US Congress. We did a variety of different kinds of projects, some about building new websites and databases, and some about changing specific ways that the US Congress functioned. Just a few examples, we worked with Congress to publish votes as data that was easy to reuse and analyze for the first time. We made tools to make it very easy for constituents to look up their member of Congress and see who represents them. We made a website where every day we would show what word was said on the floor of the Congress most frequently. And for a long time that word was jobs, and then it might switch to war, and it was just a quick way to see what was being discussed in the Congress. Sometimes we worked very substantively, getting, for example, data about tariffs and subsidies that are being suspended, so very detailed information about trade policy. And we're also responsible for getting the House and Senate to rewrite their rules about how social media could be used. Until 2008, you were not allowed as a member of Congress to have a Facebook page or to use Twitter because they just had old rules. They treated it like the mail. Like there are rules for how members of Congress can use the mail so that they're not just doing it to promote their own election. The same body was responsible for the internet, so we got regressive and sort of old rules that we helped to rewrite. So anyway, that's a little bit about where our work came from. A few years ago, we started to partner with NDI and the Latin American Network for Legislative Transparency after realizing that there were many groups all over the world doing very similar work with their legislatures, sometimes deeply adversarial and often, or just as often, in collaboration with parliaments. And so NDI led a report about these groups around the world, and we made a network of groups in almost every country, created a network of groups that work with their legislatures. That network is still strong today and lives on the website openingparliament.org. To commemorate the Global Legislative Openness Week, and in a sense, as a complement to what's happening in the Open Government Partnership, we led an advocacy effort over the last week where we got these PMO groups from around the world to help us write and deliver a letter to all of the world's parliaments, national level parliaments, making specific requests for new information that can be open, whether it's releasing data and votes about data about bills and votes, or if it's more advanced things like APIs or bulk access to data that programmers need to build better websites. That letter has been endorsed, as Scott mentioned, by groups, I think 130 groups around the world. It's been delivered to 191 national level legislative bodies. And then it's also having a carry-on effect for regional legislatures. So we are sending a similar letter to every one of the 50 US state legislatures. It's being delivered to all the Canadian regional legislatures and also to all the Indonesian regional, among others. And the reason we're so excited about that is as I said at the beginning, I think it's easy within a legislature that administrative staff often feel threatened by the NGO groups on the outside that are writing criticisms or doing their own analysis. But inevitably, when groups meet with members of parliament or with the administrators in a legislature, they realize that they have the same goal, that if you believe in democracy at all, you probably believe in the strength of a legislature. And in a world with our heightened expectations about technology, that means that there's some adjustment and reform to happen just as a baseline, and then there's a million other issues that follow on from that. But that common ground means that there's a deeply productive relationship to be had just by saying we agree in openness, we agree in making new reforms, and let's figure out what it is that we can do quickly and easily to improve how legislatures function. So we're thrilled to be, in a sense, at the center of that and to be helping groups around the world maintain and create a collaborative relationship with legislatures.
Great, thanks, John. It has been interesting that some of the inputs on the Global Legislative Openness Week, some of the dialogue has come from an incredibly diverse range of perspectives and situations. And Honorable Zazai, I think, is coming from a country that is facing no shortage of challenges, trying to do some basic development of very new institutions at the same time of dealing with a range of political challenges with respect to the election, but more broadly, and just building a democratic culture and civic education. And so starting at that point, maybe if you could share just a few observations of kind of what the Walesi Jirga has been able to do so far in terms of building some of this engagement with civil society and developing the institution, and kind of where you see the challenges and perhaps where the international community can be of help as well.
Yeah, thank you first of all for India and USAID to have a great session like this. First, I want to discuss about the role of civil societies and medias in Afghanistan, which is very new in Afghanistan. As you know, as we all know, that the democracy and democratic system in Afghanistan is very young. After a long 3 and 40 decades of war, now we have a democratic system in Afghanistan, which people can go and vote, and people can choose their MPs and president. So I want to share some experience of mine or our country's systems and social medias and civil societies, which maybe will be interested for you. Especially in medias, you know, since 2002 till now, our media and social media is very much in progress, and it's growing up very well. And I have an experience, and since 2002 and 2004, when we had an election campaign for the member of parliament, lots of our people, they don't know what is parliament and what will be the job of an MPs or member of parliament. So that was very hard election for all of us, which I was one of that campaigners and elected for that. But when the media, social medias growing up and comes in progress, and nowadays, or between these 10 and 8 years, all the people of Afghanistan, especially the big major cities, the people of Afghanistan, right now they know what is the job of an MP, or how to go to vote for a presidential election or for a parliamentarian election. So in my concern, the media, social media is very much important, and especially in our politics, in our system, and in our life. So nowadays, Afghan people and we can call the media as the fourth power in Afghanistan, because before 2002, even we don't have TV channels. We just had one government TV channels who they are just talking about their self, and people cannot say anything in the TV channels about their peace, and they were thinking about all of these things. So since 2002 and after that, right now we have lots of 32 or 42 private TV channels, and also more than 200 radio channels. But still we have lots of challenges in social medias. Like for example, we have a challenge of telecommunication and internet system. So if we want to use Facebook and Twitter, just we can use it, especially in young generation and big cities, major big cities. In other district and rural areas, we don't have internet facility for these young generation and the people of Afghanistan, that they know what their MPs are doing in the parliament, for example, and they know what the presidential or what the executive are going to do. But the radio channel is very active, and some people can hear the radio channels. And also we have lots of other challenges, which is electricity. Lots of rural and district areas still we don't have electricity. People cannot watch the TV channels, which and right now we have 42 TV channels. And before 2002 we have just one channels. But still we don't have electricity, and the people are not cannot watch the TV channels. And also the security problems for the journalists, and also for those who are talking openly in the media. For example, if a person talk openly in the media about an illegal arm commander in Afghanistan, maybe he or she will be in treat, and they will try to kill him. And also the security problem with the Taliban's and other illegal arm groups who are still living in Afghanistan, and they can do lots of things. But in social media, especially nowadays in Afghanistan, the Facebook is going very well. It's, I mean, lots of our new generations. It's a good news for us and all our globe that the new generation, and especially the young generations, are I think 70% young generations are using Facebook and Twitter nowadays. They just pick up GSM connections from some telecommunication companies, and they can use the Facebook and also the Twitters, which is very much work nowadays in Afghanistan. For example, we are here, we 5 MPs, a delegation, now we are here and we are talking about the budget process and these things. We can share all these ideas, all these things now on the Facebook, and lots of the young generations and young people who are living in Afghanistan today, they know where we are and what we are doing and what was the purpose of our trip to here. So that's a good news for especially for we people in Afghanistan. I mentioned before, after 30 and 40 years of war. So I want to say a little bit about the civil societies and youth organization too. The civil societies in the youth organization is the same, is younger, like our political system, which is now in its democratic system. From 2002, before 2002, believe me, we don't have any big civil societies or even youth organization, and especially women are not allowed it to have a civil society or to be a member of civil society or to have an organization, youth organization, or education something organizations. Before 2002, we had big problems with these kind of things. But now, fortunately, and it's a good news again, we have more than 1,500 youth organizations, registered youth organizations in Afghanistan, and more than 1,000 civil societies, and beside this, lots of media societies. They have media organizations. So nowadays we have in Afghanistan, and I'm very much happy nowadays that they are in progress. And the campaign, election campaign, which I did in 2004, now is very much easier than 2004 for we guys, because we have social medias and we have telecommunication systems, and we have democratic political system. So these are the things nowadays we have in Afghanistan. So again, thank you very much for USAID and EDI to having us here, and we'll see you later. If there is any question, we'll discuss and dialogue, I guess. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Honorable Zazai. I mean, obviously no shortage of challenges and a lot of difficult work, but it is interesting to see how kind of even in places that are dealing with a whole range of other challenges. Some of these same themes that are also affecting other legislatures also have resonance in Afghanistan as well. I think the rural-urban divide and kind of the gender divides is something that comes up, the digital divide on gender and different ways that kind of the rise of social media, in particular mobile-based social media, is also a theme that comes up a lot, and perhaps is also something that you've experienced, Honorable Mari, in Pakistan. But would you like to take the floor and share a few of your observations on kind of how this is playing out in the Pakistani context?
Thank you so much. First of all, on behalf of the delegation from Pakistan, I'd like to thank the organizers for facilitating this interactive discussion on parliamentary openness. And I obviously share the sentiments and the spirit of everyone in this room who've gathered also to commemorate the legislative openness globally. So we are part and parcel of this whole initiative, if not as members, but spiritually. And we do look forward to becoming a part of it, as you earlier mentioned. Thank you for the presentations as well. Well, Pakistan, as you all know, has had a checkered history of frequent military interventions, which has literally, the word destroyed would be hard because I believe in hope. So it has severely damaged the political and social fabric of my country. Nevertheless, we've had Democrats, we've had political workers, we've had civil society struggle against whoever the dictator in place was trying to impose black laws and violating the human rights in Pakistan. We've had a long struggle, but I, as of now, when I speak to you, I do take the honor and take pride in sharing the fact that Pakistan has, for the first time, experienced a smooth transition of democracy, that is from one democratic government to another. So if we had challenges, we had the will to fight against those, and we did so. And as a democracy and a staunch believer of democratic norms and values, we cannot shy away from the fact that openness is a reality, and we need to build mechanisms or strengthen mechanisms which will ensure openness. Pakistan is an evolving democracy. We, like the American friends put, are no perfect democracy, but we have a lot of room for improvement. I'm happy to share with you the fact that in shape of the 18th Amendment of the 1973 Constitution that was brought about in a democratic tenure, which was the previous one, was yet another milestone achieved by the Democrats in Pakistan. So I believe that the reconciliation between political realities in Pakistan has become a reality indeed. And we may have ideological differences, we may have different manifestos, but we've learned to work together. And that's the first and most positive side of Pakistan today. However, coming back to the fact that openness is also required to keep the political system, the parliament, institutions, the government on track rather. We've had debates in Pakistan, and as of now, my colleague earlier also spoke with participants, and we sort of described the way the protests in Pakistan are taking place. And we see this as a healthy sign, because a debate which would encourage us to evolve has to be a good debate. We might disagree with ways, but we cannot disagree with the fact that we need to improve. And may it be the working of Parliament, May it be reaching out to the voters, to the constituents. May it be implementation of plans and programs that were promised. The accountability is an important factor here. And this debate has, I'd say that, opened those doors, those doors that perhaps this long awaited democracy was also waiting for. And once we've settled as a democratic country, as democratic institutions in place, we keep on facing new experiences. And with each new experience, we find the solution to it. The solution, again, might not be perfect, but whatever we apply today, we're learning from it. I would also like to share with you something very interesting that I came across. And since I'm sitting in America, I want to quote this particular saying from late Prime Minister Ms. Benazir Bhutto, and well, the contribution that she thought America has made. America's greatest contribution to the world is the concept of democracy. Its concept of democracy, its concept of freedom, freedom of action, freedom of speech, and freedom of thought. So I think that now that we've collected here, I have the freedom to let my friends in America know that they need to believe in democracy also. Let my friends in America know that they have to support all democracies globally. And let my friends in America know that the respect we have for their freedoms, they must have for us. And that's most important. Like to take anyone else's time, but I would like to appreciate what Sunlight had to explain, and at the same time, because I see two faces from Pakistan who are representing PILDAT, which is a parliamentary institute for legislative development, and they are working very actively. We might agree or disagree, as all governments or parliaments do, but I think that you know, the data collection or the kind of information that is provided by one of the groups which is sitting here is yet again promising for Pakistan. There are other groups working. Civil society is active in Pakistan. We have a vibrant civil society, which though has faced problems in 60s, in 70s, we had this concept of democracy given to us by no other but Mr. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, and first time ever Pakistan experienced the one man, one vote. But then, like I said, that we've had long regimes which have literally done damage which would take years. But I am very happy to see that Charter of Democracy between major political parties in Pakistan have given us a direction, and we are moving in that direction. I look at all of you here for your experiences that we could take back home. Our friends from Kenya, Mongolia, Afghanistan, and all others sitting in this room, we would be happy to take experiences back home, because we cannot shy away from the fact that we are a global community and we have to survive. Our survival is through strong systems, and the answers that we are looking for today, they all lie in the parliaments. So we must ensure that these parliaments interact. And once again, thank you very much for this interactive forum, and please support democracies around the world. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Honorable Mari. And I think just to pick up on a few things that you said, I think you know, this idea that we are a part of a global community, I think we continue to become more and more integrated as a community as technology makes the world smaller. And I think there is an aspect of this that you know, the quality of a democracy is sometimes measured by how well it supports other democracies, and I think this is definitely a shared endeavor. You mentioned a little bit the way that social media has really also empowered social movements, and maybe also a little bit not only posing challenges for legislatures, but also for traditional political parties. There are people can organize in ways that perhaps wasn't possible decades ago, and that's having an impact in all of our political systems, and Kenya as well. Kenya, Senator Caro, just Kenya is a country that is part of OGP, has a very vibrant kind of tech community, a civil society community, and we've also seen kind of some of the negative sides of social media and technology, and ways that it can be used to also incite hate or pose other challenges to the political system. But I wonder if you could share a few thoughts on, kind of as Budget Committee Chair, thoughts on financial transparency, and also just how some of these issues are playing out more broadly in the context of Kenya.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Very briefly, it's you said the global legislative Openness Week.
Openness
Yes.
Week, yes, exactly.
I think it's just as well that we have this open round table discussion on that subject. I want to say that a couple of years ago, I think 2010, we had a new constitution in Kenya that substantially, significantly changed our system of government. And the last year's election ushered in the first political dispensation under the new constitution, which, in addition to significantly trimming down the powers of the executive, introduced, for instance, bicameral parliament, introduced two levels of government, the national government and the county government, and a lot of other changes that really focused on improving accountability and transparency in government. For instance, before the 2010 constitution, the president had extensive powers in terms of appointing senior public officers. Today, all the appointments, including to the judiciary and including foreign service ambassadors and so forth, and senior positions in government, have to be vetted by parliament. Now, one of the fundamental things in our constitution is the requirement for public participation in all government activities, including parliament, so that throughout the activities of parliament, for instance, the legislative process must involve public participation. If it doesn't, whatever law gets enacted without public participation can be invalidated by the court. Not only legislative, but everything from including impeachment process, any activity, really, we have to have public participation, and that I think is significant, and that is one thing. The second thing I want to mention is that we have a very vibrant media and politicians. Kenya is no exception that parliaments or politicians are not very popular. We have a very low rating when you look at the opinion polls. But nonetheless, they are very popular when you come to the talk shows and the programs on TV. Virtually every evening, you cannot miss politicians, Kenyan politicians on the TV, really on discussing a wide range of issues. And in terms of the media, our parliament, through the website, I think also keeps the members up to date. You can follow all your programs in terms of the order papers or the business of the day. Everything you can get on, real time on the website of Parliament. You can get all the answered, all documents that have been tabled in Parliament are literally uploaded immediately, and you can get all that on the. At the same time, the government also encourages the use of the social media. In fact, you find most of the government departments, including even security, You find the Inspector General of Police or senior government officials tweeting on events as they happen in the media, and they maintain their pages. For example, our president has one of the most active Facebook pages, and he tweets literally hourly. You can find him, updating through the Twitter. In fact, when they came in on a platform of what during the campaigns they called the digital government. But of course, my friend John, who sits here, would probably, from the minority, may not always agree. But so we use the social media as members of parliament. I think parliament itself is in fact in the process of giving iPads to every member of parliament so that they can really maintain, and quite a number of us actually use. I, for instance, update my Facebook page literally every day when we are here, and it's an easier way of keeping in touch with your constituents wherever they are, and it also helps you to generate some discussions on specific areas. For instance, I think when the examination results were announced, I remember last year, and there was poor performance, so it helps to generate a lot of discussions on what should be done really, and you get a lot of input from your constituents. The same thing also, I think, on certain challenges like insecurity and so forth. However, I think we've had challenges in the social media, particularly with regards to hate speech. We live in a country where ethnicity is very much pronounced in politics, and so you get quite a bit of, especially the young people. You find them exchange a lot of that, and we have very strict law, particularly for politicians. What you can say, whether it's on the Facebook or on the Twitter, or even in public rallies, in terms of the hate speech, and so it generates a lot of debate, I think, in recent times, particularly from our minority groups on the line between the freedom of speech and what constitutes hate speech. So it's one of the issues, I know. I want to also mention that the civil society, first let me mention that the government, nonetheless, despite being digital, I think there is still quite a bit of opacity in government in terms of some of the information that you cannot readily get from government. We had, I know, in Parliament challenges. The parliamentary committee is getting the cabinet secretaries to appear to provide other information. Sometimes it's a challenge, but I think overall, in the last 3-4 years, I think there's fundamental openness, there's transparency. We have to. Our parliament proceedings are carried live on TV. All parliamentary committee meetings are also open, public, to the media and to members of the public. And all the documents really, or information that is available in Parliament is available to the anything that is presented to Parliament must be available also to the public. Nonetheless, I think I want to say on the civil society, in recent times, although we had one of the most vibrant civil society in Africa for many years, lately I think they have been dormant. I don't know. I tend to think it's the funding from donors. There's been donor fatigue, or donors have moved to some other parts of the world, but many of the NGOs that used to be civil society members that used to be very active are not, especially after this new constitution. But otherwise, I think social media is one of the most active means of communication that is really developing, catching up in our society. So I want to take the opportunity to thank, I think, NDI for this interactive session on this subject, and we'll be happy to respond to any questions in this regard. Thank you.
Great. Well, let's try and make this then more interactive and open it up for discussion. I think, you did an excellent job of highlighting the problem. I think, you said, I think that we have no choice but to open up. It's a fact of the modern world. These technologies are here to stay. But I think we're all struggling within the global community about how best to manage difficult issues that arose, whether it's the hate speech, freedom of speech issue, or just broader issues of how do you operate as a legislature in a more transparent way that doesn't simply result in kind of cynicism about our institutions. I think oftentimes parliaments are unfairly criticized and, as you say, unloved, perhaps as politicians, precisely because they are the most open branch of government. Oftentimes, they're much more public, much more transparent than other branches of government, and so are more exposed, I think, in terms of the court of public opinion. And that's something that I think all legislatures globally are struggling with. But with that, why don't we open it up for questions, either from people in the audience, or also I don't know if Mr. Mongo, if you want to also raise a few points from kind of the perspective of the opposition in Kenya, but the floor is open, and I'll just recognize people who would like to pose a question or make a comment. Would you like to?
Thank you. Even here, I'm telling them I'm actually in the minority because all of them are from the majority, although this does not reflect our actual strength.
Yeah.
In Parliament, actually, our actual strength is a little bit better than what you see here.
Yeah.
But anyway, pardon? But she's also supposed to be in the opposition, but in the minority, but she ran away. Our party decided to cooperate with the government. Yes. But anyway, let me just make a quick comment. I think all that Honorable Senator Biro Kero did say is actually factual. The problem that we have, I think, in Kenya is not really a problem. It's a challenge because, any new system, we have basically moved from what I would call was more or less parliamentary system, although we had a president, but our system was more on the Westminster model. Now we have moved more presidential system and having two chambers which used not to exist. And again, our system is a bit slightly different because you see, ordinarily the Senate is supposed to be upper house in almost all jurisdictions where you have the two chambers. But in our case, I think we weakened our Senate a little bit because most of the functions that the Senate should do, you find is done in the House of Representatives. So that challenge in the transition will take a little of time. But I think comparatively, the Kenyan democracy has matured a lot more. That you see now, the president can be challenged and criticized. I can stand and criticize the president openly, and he would either take action, or if he feels it's not worth his response, he keeps quiet, of course, at the expense of probably his re-election. So we have really moved a step further. And what is also interesting is that even in the before we got to where we are, but after the passing of the Constitution, there was a paradigm shift. You realize that now even the Speaker of the National Assembly then did overrule the president, because the president made appointments which, in our opinion, was unconstitutional with regards to appointing the Attorney General, the Chief Justice, and he was overruled. And I think that really was a surprise to many who thought that our system is a weak democracy. I would only, as I conclude, urge that democracies that are really showing good signs of maturing like Kenya need support from America and other more mature democracies, so that instead of at times suppressing us, you pull our hands and then we we work with you, because really expecting us to be like America is not possible. But again, getting us almost to some reasonable level is important. I say that because you see, like right now, when you issue travel advisories, really, when we look at our security situation, it's not that bad. But we hear travel advisory has been issued, and it affects our economy. And with the weak economy, you don't expect any strong democracy to flourish out of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Comments, questions from the floor? Keith?
Sure. Thank you all very much for those interesting presentations. I have a question that our friend, the senator, raised when he reflected on Kenya, but for the entire panel. What role can civil society play in helping to strengthen legislative openness, and how open are your parliaments towards civil society?
Any comments on either good examples or bad examples?
Thank you for the question. Well, I'd mentioned one organization representing the civil society working closely with the parliament. There are others as well. So the question of whether or not our parliament in Pakistan is open to civil society is pretty much answered. But yes, we need to strengthen mechanisms, like I said earlier. We do have a system of accountability in place, and while completely agreeing with Scott here that I think the parliamentarians are most exposed to questions, to accountability, and furthermore, we present ourselves for greater accountability. So we are looking towards more contribution from the civil society. However, there is also a debate in Pakistan within the civil society in terms of their role, because they've had a pretty impressive struggle during dictatorial tenures. And now, as they step into, a stronger Pakistan in terms of democracy, they need to revisit their own role. So that is a debate within the civil society. As far as their connecting with the parliament or bridging, the reform bit and bringing it to the parliament, that is very much there in Pakistan.
I think traditionally the civil society played a significant role in terms of carrying out civic education, particularly when we have a new political dispensation like this one, trying to explain the legislative processes to the public, try to explain the aspects of the constitution. For example, in our case, the two levels of government, how parliament works, but there's no doubt that in recent times the civil society, particularly in Kenya, has been weakened, I think, by lack of adequate funding or whatever, but they have not been very active in that area. But we do as parliament, and I think that's the role they can actually play. Most significant is to carry out civic education so that they can explain to the public how these processes work. Because when we, for instance, have a legislation and we advertise, issue notices to the public, inviting members of the public to come for a public hearing on budget, on enactment of a new law, and so forth, you find invariably that the people who attend are just the members of the civil society, as opposed to the public and other interest groups that we really would have expected should actually come. So to an extent, themselves, they are more active. They attend all these public hearings. They on issues, anything from double taxation. They're interested in everything that goes on really on global, trying to create awareness on a number of issues. But I think there is need for civil society to try and bring the public on board so that members of the public can appreciate and understand some of the challenges in the process.
And also I have an example in Afghanistan Parliament. we have a woman caucus, which is anti-corruption and accountabilities also. And also I have an example that just it is a very near example. Just 3 months ago, I think we parliamentarians want to pass a law for the parliamentarians, which were a little bit the people were not happy with that law. And you know, lots of civil societies are very much involved in that, and the parliamentarians and our parliament invite those civil societies, and we sit together and we talk, and we hear from them, and they say this is not okay, this is not okay, and this is okay with the law. Even we have this system, and the second, lots of our parliamentarians have their own civil societies, and they are working with the civil societies and youth organization.
Let me also just ask John or Abhinav to perhaps chime in as well, because I think, you know, one of the advantages of OGP is the particularly where the field is changing so quickly, and technology is changing the way people engage in politics very quickly. I mean, there's a lot to learn, even from the U.S. I'll just offer one example, and then maybe John and Abhinav can share a few others. But so the Brazilian Congress has there's been a bit written about the hackerspace that the Parliament has created. Many of us are familiar with parliamentary press rooms and parliaments providing facilities for the press. Brazilian Congress made space available for civil society technology folks to kind of work in the parliament and collaboratively with parliament to help them in using technology both on outreach and in terms of platforms such as their eDemocracia platform for getting citizen comment on legislatures, on legislation that's pending. But John or Abhinav, thoughts?
Maybe I'll start there. I mean, I view part of our role as civil society group working with the U.S. Congress is to say things that no one else is in a good position to say. And I think there are a lot of things that no one within the Congress is able to say. And just one example is we did a study over the last week. We looked at every witness invited to testify before any committee in the U.S. House. And we just looked at gender, and only for the last few years, only 24% of the witnesses before the U.S. House were women. So less than 1/4 of the witnesses were women. And there's not really anyone whose job it is within the Congress to make that observation. And it was a very powerful observation. Both parties said this is a problem and it's something we need to think about changing and something that we should pay attention to. And there are similar observations like that about the procedures of Congress, or the technical systems that Congresses or the legislatures rely on, or the way that legislatures serve journalists that individual people within legislatures may pay attention to. But if it's no one's job to look at the whole institution, then it needs someone external to help get that process started.
Within the context of the OGP, to answer gentleman's question, civil society, of course, is key and central to the entire process. What we want OGP to be really is to change the culture of government, and that can't be done by government alone. And we recognize that civil society has to constantly play a part in every step of the way. And these national action plans are not technocratic exercises necessarily, but they are really mechanisms through which we reflect what is the will of the citizens and demand of the citizens in terms of real concrete reforms that they want. And that's one of the reasons why OGP is not a prescriptive mechanism. So essentially, it doesn't lay down standards and say countries need to follow these standards, because it recognizes that the context of openness is different in every country. And so we expect countries to create national action plans and commitments that reflect the will of civil society, or the will of the citizens. So therefore, you see a huge variety of different ways in which civil society participation is expressed in the action plans. And to pick up on a point by the senator here, you also see some of these sort of civic education, or trying to increase the capacity of citizens to understand, what might be arcane or technocratic issues of governance, and you see those filtering through the action plans as well. So, for example, Kenya, to take an example of Kenya, they've committed to creating greater spaces for opening up citizen participation in the budgetary process, or putting budgetary information online. You see other countries, committing to enacting or publishing a citizens budget. So, reducing all of the information that's found in Citizens into a digestible format that citizens can use, and then civil society organizations can use to advocate around particular issues that are important to them. So those are just some of the examples that you see in which citizen participation or civil society is reflected in these action plans, and they're definitely crucial to the success of OGP.
Great. Honorable Ayubi.
من میخوایم که سوال برادر رو جواب بدم در بخش ازی که نهادهای جامعه مدنی چی کمک میکنن، چی ارتباط دارن با قوه تقنینی. ما در افغانستان با وجود که نهادهای جامعه مدنی ما در افغانستان با وجود که نهادهای جامعه مدنی ما نوپاست، ولی کمک های بسیار بزرگ را اونا میتونن انجام داده و کردن. من مثالای را میتونم، مثلا یکی از نهادهای جامعه مدنی به نام پیس اور دموکراسی فور وومن، اینا گزارش را تهیه کردن راجع به پارلمان افغانستان که در تمام بخشا 3 وظیفه عمده را که وکلای پارلمان دارن که بخش قانونگذاری است، نظارت از اعمال حکومت است و نمایندگی از مردم است. اینا گزارش را تهیه کردن که پارلمان افغانستان در بخش قانونگذاری بسیار خوب عمل کرد داشت، در بخش نظارت ضعیفتر بود و در بخش نمایندگی از مردم ضعف‌های بزرگ را داشتن. این ما را وامی داره تا ای که کمبودی‌هایی را که داریم اونا را پر بسازیم، مشکلاتی را که داریم حل کنیم. و نهادهای جامعه مدنی افغانستان در بسیار قوانین مستقیما اونا ما را کمک میکنن. مثلا ما معاون کمیسیون معارف تحصیلات عالی و لیسه جرگه هستم. نهادهای جامعه مدنی ما را در بخش قانون دسترسی به اطلاعات که یک قانون بسیار مهم و عمده بر افغانستان که امروز هنوز کشوری است که در بلندترین درجه فساد اداری به سر میبره، اونا ما را همکاری کردن که در بخش شفافیت بسیار برای کشور ما مهم است. ولی متاسفانه چون وکلا در این قانون، چون قانون جدید بود، نمیفهمیدن، ما این قانون متاسفانه با بسیار مشکلات تصویب کردیم و بعدن این نهادها سفر را آماده ساخت بر ما به مالدیو که ما با 10 کشور سارک دیدن کردیم. اونا از تجارب خود بر ما گفتن و بعدا ما متوجه شدیم که ما این قانون با نواقص تصویب کردیم و ما باید بشینیم پس و این قانون خود تصحیح کنیم، برای اینکه بر آینده اگر این در سایه عمل پیاده بشه این مشکلات را برای کشور ما ایجاد میکنه. نهادهای جامعه مدنی واقعا اگر ما بخوایم، ما وکلا بر ما همکار خوب هستند، ولی متاسفانه اکثرا که ما میبینیم وکلا علاقمند نیستن که در کارشان دیگران مداخله کنن و تا نمیخواین که از نظریات جامعه مدنی استفاده کنن، حالان که خود پارلمان یک نهاد مدنی است. خود پارلمان از درون مردم خیسته و رول جامعه مدنی برای همکاری برای وکلا من فکر میکنم بسیار مهم است.
Excuse me, it's not all the MPs, it's just there are a small group of MPs that they are not supporting the civil societies, not all MPs.
Sure, I think it's an important point to make. I think, legislatures are often sometimes very different than government ministries when they're working on openness issues because they're extremely diverse institutions with all varieties of interests, and so there are multiple voices maybe just to offer one personal story from Afghanistan, because I think it is interesting to kind of see how technology plays out in different country contexts. But specifically with respect to women's political participation, there are some traditional societies where for a woman to engage politically, it's extremely difficult. You may have to have a male escort from the family to leave the home, to participate in any sort of public forum. There are some women in Afghanistan who have been beginning to blog and engage online, and often are finding that they're able to engage in discussion with other women and peers around the world in new ways online in a much more free way than perhaps they can sometimes do non-virtually. So it is I think an interesting aspect of how this can kind of play out in different country contexts. I think there was a comment back here or a question. Please, we'll go here and then there.
My name is Al from the Open Institute in Kenya. And my question is actually very much connected to that conversation about the diversity of opinion within Parliament. The MPs that are here are very much pro-open, at least the ones that I know. But I know that there's quite a number of them back home that still have a lot of concerns or who are, sort of against a lot of legislative openness. And I just wanted to know, from the colleagues that are here, do you understand the concerns that they have, and can you tell us about them, and how best do you think we can help as civil society to sort of convince them or to bring them over to this side?
Yeah, sorry. I mean, I think the question is recognizing that all of our parliaments are very diverse, and that there are some members that are more progressive, open, willing to try new things, and then there are more members, or there are also members of parliament that may be resistant to change or transparency. I think that's true certainly in the US, certainly in every parliament where I've worked. I think the question, which is excellent, is really how do we all collectively help bring kind of more conservative, or maybe that's not the right word, I don't mean that in a right-left sense, but more the members that are more unwilling to be open and transparent. What are the strategies or ideas, or either for civil society or you as members, to try and bring along colleagues that might be less open? Are there any advice? Or
I just cite an interesting example because YouTube is still an issue in Pakistan. There's a ban on YouTube. And my colleagues and I have been advocating for this particular site to open and the ban be lifted. And I was quite amazed that when this issue was raised in the parliament by a few of us, there were quite a few organizations outside that approached us who were particularly working on this very issue. So that tells me how vibrant the civil society in Pakistan is. However, yes, the parliament is diverse. But what is promising for me back home is the fact that even a right-wing politician in Pakistan is on Twitter. And it's one of the Jamaat-e-Islami, which is a right wing. I see the head of Jamaat-e-Islami on Twitter. So that, that's promising. Nevertheless, I think if continued effort is put into this working closely with the parliament, I don't think this is something that cannot be achieved. But now there is this grave need for people to connect to social media, because that's the way the world is evolving. I mean, for my election, apart from my door-to-door campaign and other means that I had for the election campaign, social media was an important aspect of it. My Facebook was being managed by a group of people I'd assigned them to, and there were 3 Twitter accounts, 3 handles that I had on Twitter, and all the team, they were all instructed by me to make sure that the events and the campaign pictures are put up on Twitter. So maybe have 5 followers or 10 followers. At least we accepted the trend, and this is the trend. I do understand what you're saying, but I think that this is promising when I see this back home.
There may be other observations. I'll just say that I think that example is good in terms of, I think there's sometimes a cyber utopian type view that kind of technology progress, it's always good, and I think the evidence is not there to support that, and kind of the use of social media does not follow along any clear division, whether that's kind of right-wing, left-wing, or progressive, or it is a very complex environment, and I think it needs to be understood in that light. But I don't know, Senator Caro, if you also or others, yes, Honorable.
My name is Matawa Musiemi, Chairman of the Budget and Appropriations Committee in the National Assembly of Kenya. Yeah. Now there was a very good question asked earlier by one of your colleagues about the status of civil society, and I'm not sure we give that enough attention. I think if you go to the situation in South Africa, before the fall of apartheid in 1994, civil society was very, very strong, and thereafter it got weak. The same thing happened in Kenya, and there are similarities. One of the reasons was that people who were involved in civil society went into government. I was then a General Secretary of the Council of Churches of Kenya. My colleague in South Africa, General Secretary of the Council of Churches, became Chief of Staff for Becky, and then who else came after Becky? No, Becky. It was Becky as Vice President and then President, Frank Chikane. Reverend Frank Chikane. And that is just to make the point that there were many leaders in civil society who went into government. In Kenya today, the current Chief Justice and the current governor of one of the counties and other people went into government. They were very critical people in civil society. So there is a sense in which there was hemorrhage in civil society. Number two, as always happens in transitions, civil society kind of lost the plot, and it was no longer clear what its mandate was. Part of the reason was, in Kenya, the new constitution gave oversight roles to government institutions. So civil society kind of got lost. And in a number of cases, it was deemed to be politically partisan, which didn't quite help. Now, I think the point made by Senator Billow, I think, is valid, and the question asked by my colleague, I think, is a very good question. Concentrating on building what I would call civic competence, because at the end of the day, if you can build civic competence in a citizenry, then the country has a future. But I'll take it further to answer my colleague. I think the way to help members of parliament who perhaps are struggling with the question that he has raised, I think is to come back to the old question of the importance of political parties in a democracy. Currently today in Africa, Kenya is no exception, political parties basically take an ethnic platform. We do not really have issue-based, value-based political parties. They normally ride on ethnic blocks, and that is a huge loss to society. You can have a very good candidate who can't make it because they cannot marshal the numbers tribally. It's a bit like here, you can have a good candidate, but because they cannot raise campaign funding, they cannot get elected. It's that sort of a situation. So I would say to my friend, I wish civil society would get back, I think to two things. And as I speak as one who is very sympathetic to civil society because I was there for a very long time. I wish that civil society in Kenya and in a lot of these countries would get back to research. We used to say that research is the handmaiden of advocacy, and spend money in research, because I don't think government does enough in research. Number two, begin to lobby and to push the idea of viable political parties that are issue-based and value-based. And because I think if you can have political parties, and normally these struggles take long, people get impatient. They think they can achieve it in 5 years, 10 years. No, these social political journeys don't take that short. They take a generation. So if we can begin to plant the seed today, 20, 30 years down the pike, we will begin to get the kind of political parties that we want. And I think civil society needs to be patient and needs to put its hand on the plow and keep pushing. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just add, and then Abhinav may want to add to this as well. I think within OGP, in a number of countries, there are some good examples of precisely that partnership between civil society and parliaments to help parties be more transparent in an ideology-based or non-ethnic identity-based way. So you see, for example, lots of websites that are trying to help parliaments with parliamentary transparency, also helping political parties convey and communicate their platform in a clear way to citizens so that citizens know kind of what concrete policies a political party stands for. So, you know, I think others may have a different view, but I think partnership between civil society and parliaments or parties around civic education is often one way, because there are sometimes some common shared interests in building this educated citizenry. Yeah, please.
I'd just like to add one recommendation that I feel that when it comes to what civil society can do and contribute in terms of this diversity within the parliament on use of social media, I feel that the greater responsibility would be to educate the people, the masses, as to how this very important tool can be used. One of my fellow colleagues from Kenya did talk about her experience as a female politician and how this hate speech has affected the politicians. And these are examples back home as well. Advantage and disadvantage is altogether when it comes to advancement. But if this advancement, which is important, it's productive, I think the role of civil society should not be limited to sort of trying to lift the ban from YouTube, but also educate the people at large as to how one can make better use of this very instrument or tool that we have on hand.
Great. Abhinav, did you want to add something?
Sure. I think this question raises some of the gaps I think we face in the open government community, if you want to call it that. I think one of the things that we are not that good at or we lack is the vocabulary to articulate what these reforms mean to the citizen in a sort of, to put it crudely, like, you know, in a kind of a pocketbook. How does it really affect them from a day-to-day point of view? To us, you know, say for example, right to information law clearly is, you know, a very fundamental sort of legal infrastructure for open government or democratic governance. But how do you convince somebody or citizens, you know, on how to use the law? What does this really mean to them as citizens? You know, and so I think we need to find a better way of articulating what these things mean to make people care. And if people care, then I think parliamentarians will care. If their constituencies care, then parliamentarians will care. And I think related to that is also making the case that openness, you know, works. So essentially, it's not openness for the sake of openness, but building the evidence base for why openness is good and why is it important and why is it beneficial.
Great. I think we'll take maybe just a few final comments. I don't know, Honorable Wanjira, I don't know if do you want to add something? Okay, I'll go to you first here.
Thank you. My name is Martha. I represent women in the Senate of Kenya, and I wanted to actually add my voice onto the issue of public participation and the role in building open legislative agenda. And I think, personally, I'm the vice chair of the Labour Committee in the Senate. We have tried to involve the public in everything that you do, and you find that when you call out for participation in a room like this, maybe you'll find not even one civil society group will show up. Then when the law has been signed into a statute, you see them going to court. And so for me, that disconnect between the civil society, because the process is actually required by law that before any law is passed, you have 30 days public participation. You don't see them. Then after it is passed, they go to court to challenge it. I think for me, they should participate as a civil society right from the beginning, so that because how it looks to us is that you're just looking for an avenue to please your donors, maybe, or to get work to do. And that, for me, does not come out very well. Secondly, the issue of public participation in terms of the wider public. We need to, I know as a country we have made it, we have put it in the constitution as a requirement, but the legal framework of how that is done becomes a problem, because you cannot go to a marketplace and hold a public participation program. It won't work. And you're doing maybe a budget that is very technical. How do you break it down to that person who is at the lowest level, and it becomes productive? And as you know, politicians are not very popular. I mean, even here, the latest poll we were told yesterday, they are rated at 14%. It's not different from my country. So we are not very popular people with the people. So when you get out there, in fact, as recent as last month, one committee had gone to audit a certain road in a rural area. They were actually chased away. You'll be pelted with stones, and as a person, that is not what you're looking for. So in terms of the legal framework, the capacity for the public should be created so that it becomes easier even for politicians to engage. I should not fear to go to the people, because I fear that I will have to remove my shoes and run for my life, because of that perception of the politicians versus the people. So the capacity should not only be with the civil society, it should also include the people, so that we have some kind of legal framework of engagement and it becomes easier.
Absolutely. I think that it's a very real world example. I think, we hear from lots of MPs about they're sometimes reluctant to go to their districts because they're treated as ATM machines or cash machines, and every time they go to their district, there are certain expectations from their constituencies to support development, and so it's certainly not an easy job. And I think you're exactly right that we need to kind of work collectively together to build a more democratic culture. I think we'll take a final comment from Honorable Ganbatar. I think the Mongolian delegation, I should just say, which was part of the HDP delegation here in town, stayed with another meeting and was unable to join us at the beginning. But would you care to share a few kind of observations on kind of this from the Mongolian context before we adjourn?
Тэгэхээр амьдрал бол баян учраас мэдээж бүх асуудлын ард гарна гэж байхгүй. Асуудлыг цаг очиж шийдээ, хямд зардлаар шийдэх гэвэл амьдрал өөрөө баян. Тийм учраас бол бүх асуудлын ард гарна гэж бол байхгүй. Асуудлыг хямд зардлаар цаг хожиж шийдэхийн тулд бол бусдын туршлагыг сонсдог, хуваалцдаг. Тэр агуулгаараа бол та бүхний зохиож байгаа энэ арга хэмжээ бол маш чухлаа гэж бид ингэж бодож байна. Бид энэ хоёр зүйлийг энэ бусад орныхоо төлөөллөөс бас тодруулах гэсэн юм аа. Тэгэхээр ил тодлоо байдалд хэвлийн эрх чөлөөний тухай яриад байна л да. Тэгэхээр иргэний оролцоог хангахад хэвлийн эрх чөлөө хангалттай байдгүй юу? Жишээлбэл хэвлэлийг иргэн хүн орлого багтаа хүн авч явж чадахгүй. Мөнгөтэй хүн л авч явна шүү дээ. Тийм учраас бол хараад байхад бол хэвлэл хичнээн олон байлаа ч гэсэн тэр нөгөө орлого ихтэй хүмүүсүүдийн одоо эрх ашигыг илүү хамгаална. Жишээлбэл татварыг багасгах гэдэг ч юм уу, тэгэл одоо тэдний эрх ашиг төлөв. Тэнд очиж тэр одоо хэвлэл мэдээллийн хэрэгслэр хин иргэний нийгмийг төлөөж оролцож байна. Төрийн бус байгууллагууд бас мөнгө муутай учраас мөнгө төлөө төрийн болгон үйл ажиллагаа явуулаад чаддгүй. Жишээл Афганистанд их олон телевиз радио байдаг гэж. Гэхдээ тэр бүгд чинь хөрөнгөтэй хүмүүсийн л гарт байгаа. Иргэний нийгмийн яг одоо жишээлбэл тэр зүдэрч байгаа олонхын эрх ашгийг бол хамгаалж чадах уу гэдэг нэг. Хоёрт төсвийн ил тод байдал дээр бол боловсруулалтын шатанд иргэний оролцоо гэдэг бол бас нэг тийм ч үнэмшилтэй биш ээ. Зүгээр энэ шатанд бол одоо судалгааны байгууллагууд, эрдэм шинжилгээний байгууллагууд байгаа тэр мэрэгжлийн одоо иргэдийн төлөөллийг оролцуулах асуудал бол байж болно. Тэрнээс биш одоо тэр том төслийн үр ашиг тооцоос судалгааг иргэн хүн хийж чадахгүй, нэгдэж чадахгүй. Харин иргэний оролцоо бол төсвийн хяналтын шатанд байх хэрэгтэй. Төсвийн захирж байгаа улсууд буруу зүйл зарцуулахгүй байхын тулд тэдний мэдээллийг иргэдэд хүргэдэг байх нь хамгийн чухал гэж бол би ингэж бодож байна. Тэрнээс биш ил тод байдал гэдэг бол бас хязгаартай. Хяналт жишээлбэл манад бол төсвийн одоо хөрөнгө оруулалтын томоохон бүх гүйлгээг тухайн байгууллагууд гаднаас самбар дээр мэдээлж идэг. Өнөөдөр тэдэн төгрөгийг ийм зүйл зарцуулсан гэдэг. Тэгээд нэг хянагдаад ирэхээр бол тэр мөнгө зарцуулж байгаа хүн бол харин найж эхэлдэг. Энэ бол харин иргэний оролцоо. Иргэний оролцоо. Танад яаж явж?
Great. I'll turn that to Abhinav and John in a minute, just if they have any observations. But I think that those questions both show, I think, the utility of OGP. I think on the how do you explain the technical budget to a citizen? There is a fiscal transparency working group, and I think part of the things that are shared through OGP are ways of visualizing very complex budgets in a way that people can kind of see, well, this is for healthcare, this is for this region, this is for this sector. If someone gets a budget document that's like this with lots of accounts, not only is it hard for the average citizen to understand that, they can't, it's hard for many MPs to kind of make sense of that as well. And so I think one of the productive discussions that I've been part of in OGP is kind of ways of visualizing and taking complex information and making it more accessible to MPs and to the average citizens. On media ownership, I'm not sure kind of if there are many open government action plans that have touched on issues of media, but it's clearly an important part of the equation. John or Abhinav, any quick responses before we close on that?
Could start there. I mean, a major concern for Sunlight and from our work in the U.S. is about how money intersects with politics. And one way of describing that is that for politics to be successful and healthy, it has to continue to be competitive. And in an environment where the media is owned by a single actor, or in an environment where all the money for politics ends up under one political party, then the competitiveness goes away, and then you can't get out of that situation. We're like Hungary is going through a similar situation where power was consolidated and then the democracy ends up weaker on the other side. There's obviously no easy solution to that problem, but I think media ownership and how political campaigns are financed are absolutely fundamental questions that are necessary to be thoughtful about in order to protect political power that is democratically accountable. And then on the question about the budget, I think one reason that budgets are so difficult to understand is that the shape of a budget, whether it's the proposed budget or the budget that is passed, it tends to reflect the shape of the people that are in charge of it. So, where's the budget committee and who proposes it and what are the offices? It reflects that shape rather than the shape of how a citizen might understand it. So it's an artifact of a complex process of competing power centers rather than an artifact of, if you were teaching government, you would create something very different than a budget. And I think that's something that we should, maybe budgets should look a little bit more like lessons about how the government works than reflect the structure of who's in charge of the budget. But to change that, we have to change the budget process, and that's clearly very difficult. But I think that's part of the reason it's so difficult to understand.
Again, in the context of OGP, the issue of fiscal openness, budgetary openness is paramount, and we find that out of the 1,000+ commitments that were made by governments in the first year, budgetary openness was among the top 5 most important priorities for governments. And we'll see that again in the next 1,000 commitments that countries are now committing to. I'm sure we'll see that same, the same fact reflected. So I guess it raises the question as to what is the value of OGP. Say if you are a government reformer in some way, or if you're a civil society reformer. And at one of our meetings, somebody said from the government, I believe it's from the government of UK, saying if you're an open government reformer, it can be a very lonely sort of world that you live in, because in many of these country contexts, assistance is not readily available in terms of how do you implement certain open government reforms, budgetary openness reforms that you have in mind. They're great ideas, but really how do you put it into action? How do you translate that or operationalize that? And that's where the value of OGP comes in. Because you're instantly connected to this network of peers who are working on these issues, both within government as well as outside government. And we see that happening within the OGP, where governments are reaching out to other governments to understand how certain reforms were enacted. So an example would be in the context of legislative openness, the Senate of Mexico working with the Senate of Honduras, on transparency issues in particular, or the government of Mexico working with the government of Georgia to implement a right to information access law. So OGP is great for that, where you need not, reinvent the wheel, and you can tap into networks and expertise of other experts who are working on these very issues. Just really quickly on the question of media, I think that is a gap in OGP right now. Obviously, the media is an extremely important constituency and player in the openness debate, but we've not seen too many commitments being made by governments in that area, and perhaps that's something that needs to be encouraged further.
Final word.
Okay, thank you. Actually, talking about the competitiveness in politics and legislative openness, I think that another reason that is extremely important is the very unfortunate reality that the mindset of extremists is threatening our freedoms. And so we need not allow that space to be left. May it be the social media, the efforts of the civil society, or the collaboration of parliaments through this forum right here. So I think that all negatives can be done with if only the positive approach is there. So use of, you all know, I need not tell you, but the militant groups, wherever they are also users of social media. And media, for instance, the radio stations or the FMs. So I think if we leave the space, we also leave the space for such people. And we need to unite to ensure that the world is free from, such a mindset. And this can only happen when we promote peace and support democracy, and come together as Democrats on a forum which is that of the legislative openness or any other, but I'd say respect democracies, and that's the way out.
Well, it's a great. I'm afraid we do have to adjourn. We're already a few minutes over, but I think it is a great point on which to end, because I think the idea of kind of OGP is really that solidarity or collaboration across country to kind of figure out what is a very complex set of problems and issues. So please join me in thanking our panelists and also the members of the delegations that have participated in this week's event. And so thank you very much. And the delegation will take a quick break, and then we'll come back to this room in about 15 minutes. So thank you.